Warrior, welcome. Today we have an extra special discussion. Our Warriors hashtag is community creates change. And two of the biggest change makers we know, join us. Major Margareta Ivarsson and Raissa Di Caterina. They both have a rich history of service with the Salvation Army and currently work in the greater New York area. And I bet you think of the Salvation Army as those red kettles and bells and
Mhm.
happening during Christmas time out on the streets, collecting Salvation Army my entire life, collecting the donations for vulnerable communities. And they do this, but they do so much more. Human trafficking is the use of force, fraud, and coercion. And that is the standard definition we always, kind of quickly hear when people are describing this. It kind of goes in one ear, out the other, in my opinion. However, we must discuss victims and survivors and all of this much more extensively and not just slap a band aid on these vulnerable people, but intervene and educate to prevent new victims and put more emphasis on holistic healing to truly create change. And today we're going to really honor our hashtag, Community Creates Change. We're going to have a very realistic, I put a warning out right now, conversation about Pearlescence. You're going to find out, you might say, what's Pearlescence? You're going to find out everything you ever wanted to know and more about Pearlescence. It's a Salvation Army program about empowering community change through trauma informed practices. And it is such an honor to welcome back Major Margareta Ivarsson, and for the first time, right here on the Warriors, Raissa Di Caterina. I love both of you so much. I'm just going to put that out there at the top of this. But let me start with Margareta is the command secretary for spiritual leadership development, social justice representative, and KeepSAfe coordinator, and Raissa is the anti-trafficking awareness coordinator at the Salvation Army Greater New York. The website is salvationarmynewyork.org. The information, all the links, all the social media handles will be loaded into the body of this video. Nobody will miss anything. I promise you. So, welcome, my beautiful warriors.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's great to be back. Lynn, we love you too.
Uh,
It's
thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm gonna jump right in, Margareta. I'm gonna start with you, and I want you to talk about, give us some of the roots. I want people to really understand about the Salvation Army because even recently I learned things that I did not know. So, give us some of the roots, the formation, how this all occurred, and a little bit about your journey, Margareta, how you became involved with all of this.
Yeah, so I was kind of born into the Salvation Army. My parents were like warriors on the ground, if you will, my whole life. And I think I grew up in community, and I really didn't know any other life than that. That you should always care for each other in the family, you should care for people in your neighborhood, and you should live a life that can be counted for as support to others who might not have what you have. So that is my background. When we look at the Salvation Army, there's a lot of historical books you can read, but one of the things with Pearlescence, when we started that over 6 years ago now, we were very intentional about studying our history, both international and here in Greater New York. And we realized that people have been doing what we are doing for years and years and years, and maybe some things fell into on the waysides because the Salvation Army has evolved and do so many things. But one of the things that really is still the foundation is William Booth's Soup, Soap, and Salvation, right? It's easy to remember too. And we were just studying that this time, and we found out that it was Raissa who said, Maslow's hierarchy of needs came 1954, but William Booth's Soup, Soap, and Salvation was present all the way from 1865, right? So we're talking about almost a century before the foundation for our psychological studies. William Booth had these ideas. He even wrote a book, In Darkest England and the Way Out, that came out 1890, that was revolutionary at the time. And we go back to that book sometimes, we read it again, and it has old-fashioned language, but the ideas are not old-fashioned. It's very much about meeting needs the immediate needs that people have, not expecting that people can start talking about faith practices if they have an empty stomach, for example. And if we look around in greater New York today, we have homelessness on our doorsteps if we live in the city. And insecurity, food insecurity is rampant still, right, after the pandemic. And we're seeing a loss of hope. I see into people's eyes every day, and I see that there's no hope. And if you have no hope, you have to start somewhere. And I think that's where trauma-informed practices come in. And that's where we need to understand the history as well as modern psychology, modern research, brain science. And we need to kind of bring all these things together under the faith-embraced mission that we do. And that's what we have done. And I believe that we have something that's working really well, that others are interested in and want to look at the methods and ideas. So I'm going to leave it there a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get into it with Raissa about Pearlescence. I just want to say one thing. Do we have T-shirts that say like "Soup Soap Salvation"?
I don't know. Maybe we
We
should.
should. I think everybody would be like, "I want one of those shirts," and then we could open up the conversation and get them talking. I just thought of
I
that.
like it. I like that.
Let's talk to
Something to think about. I just think it's a catchy kind of tune. You know what I mean? And we got to do what we got to do to get people to pay attention. Okay, so I really did digress there, but we should think about that. But Raissa, I'm so happy that you are here to explain more about Pearlescence and the trauma-informed care. We want to know about this program because when I found out about it and the work you do and how it does work and how you treat people like human beings, and getting back to you, Margareta, like there's really nothing new under the sun. Like it's still all works. So please, Raissa, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you're on this journey, and then let's talk about Pearlescence.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Lynn, for having us. The feelings are all mutual. We love you so much and love this community that you've created that creates change. So yeah, similar to Major Ivarsson, I was very blessed and fortunate to grow up in a family and in a home where others always came first. My parents were always spearheading soup kitchens, food pantries, music programs, social services programs, wherever we lived. So I grew up around that. You know, I grew up being very aware of how different communities lived. I grew up very aware of how different families functioned. I grew up very aware of trauma that we all experience. And at the same time, the Salvation Army was giving me avenues to explore those passions of like, okay, I see the trauma, I see the hurt, I see the injustice. What are we going to do? You know, we're not just going to like mope about it, complain, write papers about it. No, like we need to do something.
Yes.
So I'm very grateful that through the Salvation Army, my passions were able to be honed in and to actual action. So when I was graduating high school, when I was going into college, I knew like I need to study whatever gets me into this field. So I went into sociology, right? And then I start this job and I'm learning so much. And people are like, think about counseling, think about counseling. And I'm like, oh, counseling. Yes, I'm going to do it. And then through that comes trauma-informed care. And when I heard about trauma-informed care, when I learned about therapy, it just opened up all these new horizons for me. And I'm so passionate about it. And I'm glad that we really get the time to talk about it because it's a buzzword. You know, we can all say trauma-informed care, but like, what is it? You know, what does it mean? So when we talk about trauma-informed care, the 4 R's are so important, right? Realize, recognize, respond, and resist re-traumatization. Realize, you know, my trauma, your trauma, everyone's trauma, it's all different. How I experience it, how others experience it, how they react, it's different. But theirs is as valid as mine, and mine is as valid as theirs, right? There's no right way to experience trauma. But at the same time, we have to be on the lookout for symptoms, right? We have to recognize the signs of trauma through a non-judgmental lens, of course, just allowing people to experience and express what's going on inside. But then we also have to respond, right? We recognize the issue, we realize the issue, how are we going to respond? And that's always through a strengths-based approach, right? Unconditional positive regard, showing up with empathy, compassion, love. And through that, as a service provider, as the care, we resist re-traumatization. We don't tell survivors how to feel, how to be, what part of their journey they need to be on, what services they have to do. We're here to support, we're here to empower, we're here to encourage, to promote autonomy. And we're just along for the journey, collaborating however we can, ensuring that survivors get whatever help they want whenever they want. And I love that. I love being a part of something that's trauma informed.
You said a mouthful there.
I know.
No, but you know what? It is something that needs to be drilled into everybody. Trauma, that word is thrown around a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but it's never really, in my experience at least, really broken down, really explained. And I like everybody does experience some form of trauma,
Mm-hmm.
right? It affects everybody. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter who you are, where you come from. Some have more trauma, some have less, but we have to, if we don't deal with that, non-judgment, non-judgment, because I love that. We
Yeah.
don't, we're never going to make headway. We're never going to be that hashtag community creates change. So I love that. I do want to point out Pearl. I want everybody to understand it stands for purposed, empowered, appreciated, respected, and loved.
Mm-hmm.
Love, 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 love. I just throw that out there. Major Margareta, I would like to ask you something again that isn't spoken about a lot, in my opinion, this generational kind of trauma that goes on. And it's a tough
Yeah.
cookie, or what is that, a tough nut to crack? Because
Yeah.
I'm trying a lot to talk about it and people aren't absorbing it, or they say it's like the culture, it's the society, leave it alone. But tell us about this, because this has been since the beginning of time going on.
Yeah, and I think as you listen to Raissa go through the steps of what trauma really is and how we need to respond to trauma, because that's part of it too. It's not just this is the facts and this is how it works. It's also what do we do not to re-traumatize somebody that is face to face with us. It is so easy for me to say things or to use words that maybe have been used for ages, but they might be hurtful. They might not be what that person need in that moment. And I think what's really important for us to understand that generational trauma is happening because we don't know enough about trauma and how to respond to trauma. So that is where awareness comes in. We need to know this trajectory of trauma and response. And we know now that generational trauma has been prevalent in our world from the beginning of time.
Right.
If you look at it in scriptural context, I think it's interesting that in Deuteronomy chapter 11, there is this saying that today you can choose blessing or you can choose curse. This was said to the people of Israel. They were in Egypt and they were afraid of getting out of there. They were afraid of the journey. And the idea was God said, I have a plan and I have a blessing for you. But they were not ready to say, yes, let's go. Or they said, yes, let's go. And then the next minute they fell back in their old trauma, right? It was better in Egypt. I had food there. I don't know what the future holds. I knew that. So sometimes we choose negative patterns because we know what those are. And instead of anticipating a future full of blessing. So I wanted to talk about that also. There was a Jewish author, Eddie Hillesum, who was in a concentration camp, right, in Auschwitz. And it's just interesting to see how she dealt with that atrocity, right? That's the worst trauma you can think about, being imprisoned to die. And she read a journal that a Christian friend, Tide, had written that gave her hope. And he had written, take him gently into your arms, Father. That was a prayer for somebody who was going to die. And she said, and that is how I feel, always and without cease, as if I were lying in your arms, O God, so protected and sheltered and so steeped in eternity, as if every breath I take were filled with it, and as if my smallest acts and words had a deeper source and a deeper meaning. So that can be the experience of somebody in a moment of grace when you're in the midst of trauma. And I think that story is very poignant when you think about that. We look around and say, oh, it's generational trauma. It's always going to be this way. No, it's not. Because at any moment, and if we practice trauma-informed care, that person's life can change 180 degrees. And it could be because they meet Lynn on the street. It could be because Raissa showed empathy. It could be anything really that is done out of love for God in that moment can change that person's trajectory 180 degrees. So that's what I
Yeah.
always help
Powerful.
with generational trauma. It is not forever, and it can become generational blessing.
Very, very powerful words. And, I want to also point out a lot of the survivors I've worked with, they say to me, I have found God, I have found Jesus, and really have turned their lives around. And I would say like 90% of them, that's what gave them the strength.
Yeah.
That has been my experience to get out of prostitution or to get out of domestic violence or something like that. So what you're saying is so powerful, and we must share that message,
Yeah.
right? Whatever it takes, right? To break this. And as you said, it could be meeting, Raissa on the street. It could be you giving somebody a sandwich. It could be me,
Yeah.
I don't know, just putting my hand on their shoulder. And that's what we have to stay with. That makes the difference, all of this, and the power of prayer and devotion. That's what I think. Now, Raissa, let's get into a little bit trauma.
Yep.
When somebody is affected by trauma, people have to understand. I have had people say to me, oh, I don't know, I would just kick somebody and run away. Well, a pimp or domestic violence. No, because your brain isn't functioning correctly. Your body isn't functioning. Tell us about brain chemistry and how all of this plays into the actions somebody is held hostage by, basically.
Yes, thank you, Lynn. I think this is part of the topic that is so necessary for all of us to truly understand, right? Because if we are not them, we cannot truly understand how their brain is functioning, what their thought processes are, right? What are the reactions? And it's the physiological effects of trauma. We talk a lot about the mental, the behavioral, the physical, the spiritual, but there are physiological changes that can occur when trauma happens, right? And that is all in the brain. So there are these three important parts of the brain, and this is another mouthful. But these parts of the brain, they're the prefrontal cortex, right? You have your amygdala and you have your hippocampus, right? And when we talk about trauma, these are the three areas of the brain that usually help us make reasonable choices, right? They help us to regulate. They help us to be aware of our surroundings and know, like, this is danger, this is not danger. I should go there, I shouldn't do that. I should say this, I shouldn't. They really help us function. When trauma happens, our signals get crossed, right? The wires, some of them are cut, some of them are now reacting a lot. We have hyperarousal, but it's truly because our brain has been affected. So when we talk about trauma-informed care, it's not just long-term housing, it's not just getting them to the doctor, it's not just education, right? But how can we take care of their brain? How can we provide comprehensive services for the physiological, for the psychological, for the emotional, for the spiritual, for everything? And it's just the main parts of the brain and how they're affected. And it's just really important for service providers, for the public to understand. They're affected. Their brains are working differently, and that's because of the trauma. But we have to work with them and how their brains are working right now to get them to where they want to be.
So the bottom line for this is I'm always trying to break things down so people can very easily understand. There's really not a one size fits all.
Correct.
It's the individual approach and listening to that person, and then knowing and having those resources, those steps available to take action. And I think that's one of my, not that I like to complain, my warriors, but a lot of people make it a one size fits all. And I'm always saying, no, you have to take the time and step back, get to know that person, understand their trauma, hear them, get them to trust you so they tell you the full scope, which is a tough one, of their trauma. And that is the only way we're going to make any kind of inroads with all of this. And so we recognize all of this neuroscience behind trauma, because you just explained it. And I'm glad you explained it, Raissa, instead of me. But I do a lot of that with children, with the brain and all that, and they don't make informed decisions and all that. But I'm glad you got to say those words today, not me, because it is a mouthful. But we also have to combine it as Major Margareta told us, like we're going to have faith and we're going to have science, and we're going to combine those, and those together cannot fail. So, what I want to ask you about, Major Margareta, let's talk about how you, being that you are the expert in this field with faith, how are we going to combine all of this? How do you accomplish this with a client, an individual? Give us an example of how you approach this.
So I think we've all heard about fight and flight. I think that's something that people in general knows, that our reactions, spontaneous, are very often, if we become in a stressful situation, right? Either we fight it or we flee from it. In recent research, we talk about the word fawn. That's basically when trauma makes you paralyzed. You can't fight, you can't flight. You just freeze and fawn. Right there are all these different expressions, especially for trafficking survivors who have been through horrendous trauma for over a long time, or maybe very intense time, even if it's only been a couple of days and it's been you've been taken advantage of 100 times one night. Like I heard a story, right? Like, how do you ever recover from that? So what we need to understand is that faith and spirituality are strength-based practices. It goes to the core of our being as human beings. So if we believe that we're created in God's image, and many theologians say we are image and we are dust. We know that one day we're going to die and we're going to become dust. The body will become dust. So we understand that we have both these perspectives within us. But the most important thing for hope is that we are created in the image of God. And as such, we have the nature, and it's explained in the nature of Jesus Christ, right? Who was truly and properly God and truly and properly human being, as we say in one of our doctrines. And really, the faith studies around this now talks a lot about the way of Jesus. Like, Jesus never practiced fight or flight. He always practiced being in the situation. And he had a third way of being. I think it was Walter Wink who said that. The third way of Jesus. You can read about that in some scholarly writings. But that means that there is another way to act. And I think that's where generational trauma meets generational blessing. I have a choice at any point of my life to stop and think, what have my life been like up to this point? What do I want it to be like tomorrow or 3 hours from now? And that is the empowerment of human beings. And that is just so interesting to me. Caroline Oakes is an author who has recently written about Jesus in the Gospels, and how if you go back to the Greek words, very often the Gospels are much deeper than you just read it off the page, because a lot of translations got lost in time in terms of what words really mean. For example, the word repent comes from metanoia, which really means what I just explained. You stop and you make a 180-degree change. And that is really what Jesus called people to do with their lives. He asked them to stop, and he asked them to believe, and he asked them to move forward. So Caroline Oakes says in the book Practice the Pause, we live in a time when both the Gospels and science are showing us the potential of finding short interludes of time to be still, to let go, and to create that nanosecond of pause that can open us to the power of God in us to transform our lives and the world around us. I think she put it in a very good way, because she compared the brain studies to scriptural studies of the life of Jesus. And she came to that solution that we live in a time when we are much more informed, both in the faith-based world and also in the scientific world. And how are we going to use all these tools and all this information and revelation to become the change this world needs? And I think in terms of working with a client, you start where they are. You know, very often when we meet a client on the street, they have come to Sunday school in their life sometime, or they have a grandmother who prayed for them, or they had a mother who they know had a strong faith, even though she didn't show it maybe. And there are people all the time when we meet people where they are, they have an experience. And it is so important to affirm that experience. And that's where you start, and letting them tell you their story before you start implementing things that you think that they might need.
Excellent. Now, Raissa, I want to throw this towards you because every day I wake up, I am thinking about families with children.
Yeah.
I want to get into that. How so much going on with all of that.
Yeah.
How are we going to address all of this trauma, all of the vulnerabilities, all of the lacking in society that seems to be escalating? Explain it, and how are we going to break those chains and help as much as we can?
Yeah, no, thank you, Lynn. You know, the Salvation Army really recognizes that trauma rarely ever just affects an individual. There's usually a family, there's a group of people who are being affected by a trauma that maybe happened to one person, but we're all connected, right? If something happens to me, my mom is affected, my dad is affected, we're all affected by something that can happen. And we recognize that this is a group effort, right? This is really our one-on-one effort. We have a team of providers. We have a team of collaborators who are now working with a family, right? And that requires holistic, strengths-based approaches. And the Salvation Army has an amazing program in Greater New York. It's called Pathway of Hope. And it's specifically geared towards families, right? The idea is that the family is committed to working with a team of case managers for a few years, dedicated to just, okay, what are our barriers? Let's work through the barriers. What are our goals? Let's work towards our goals. What can we do right now to change how we feel tomorrow? What services do we need? What support do we need? And it's like sort of a 24/7 work that we do with the family for years and years and years until we feel like, okay, they're ready. They're established. They're safe. They're independent. They don't need us anymore. You know, we're just now like the cheerleaders and the fans. But it's truly a remarkable program that does exactly what Major Iverson just talked about. It encourages that pause, right? We understand that this family has gone through so much. We're giving them a second to, okay, you've been through this. Let's think, let's be still, let's make a plan. What's the first step? Let's do it. Once we do that, let's get to the second step, right? And we go through it slowly, sustainably, ethically, always empowering the family to make choices that make sense for them. And it has just turned the lives around for so many families in the Greater New York Division and truly nationwide. And we're very grateful for something that's not just for individuals, but for families.
This is such a needed program. Raissa, is that when you were telling me a while back about the children? Was this part of the program where they were holding the signs? Remember?
Were they holding the signs?
Or was that could have been something else? But they came around after they got strengthened from like depression to like hope and happy.
Exactly.
So
the Salvation Army has so the Salvation Army has that avenue. We have summer camp ministries, right? And we collaborate with Pathway of Hope, and we encourage the children of those families to come to these summer camps and have that be still moment for a week, right? Be in that safe space for a week, participate in music, participate in play, participate in things that kids really should be exposed to. And it is such a healing time for them. And we see that through those activities of, you know, when I came in here, I was depressed and I was anxious and I felt this and I felt alone. But now after 7 days, I feel seen and I feel heard and I feel safe. And that changes, again, the family trajectory and the family dynamics.
Major Margareta, how do you keep yourself? I want to ask both of you this. This is tough work, advocacy. We go like 24/7. We don't realize we keep going. How do you take care of yourself? Because we do also have to acknowledge we have to have some self-care in order for us to stay strong and be warriors and do a good job. How do you do it for yourself, if you want to share that?
Yeah, I think for me, I have always had a close God relationship since I was a little girl. I can't explain it other than that we are all created in the image of God, and God speaks to children as much as he speaks to adults. I think that I was in an environment where I could find God easily as a child, and that's not every person's privilege, for sure. But even so, I have seen in the most terrible situations how God comes through and how God protects a child. And I think for me, it has been, I've learned through the years that I need a lot of space to realign my relationship with God. That is the absolute most important thing in my whole life. It's not the mission and the uniforms and all the fantastic things we get to do. I sometimes I think about what would happen if I woke up tomorrow morning and the Salvation Army was not. And I just know I would be fine because I am with God and God would have something for me that day. So I think that is just so important. And I think sometimes as ministers, we can lose that. That's a battle for time, a lot of time. And I spend a lot of my ministry ensuring that the pastors that I have influence over are practicing good practices for themselves. And that is something that is really exciting in terms of how we can influence each other too and hold each other accountable. Raissa will speak a little bit later about how we hold each other accountable in Pearlescence. It's a whole regimen of well-being practices really that we need, because we haven't always done this right. Let's just say that we sound like the Salvation Army always have their act together. That's not the case. We did this work in the beginnings, and we were those people on the front lines, and we never stopped. And we started looking at each other and say, we don't feel well. What just happened this week? And we started to realize that we needed to put preventive practices into place for us as helpers. And you've known Mr. Rogers, he always said, look for the helpers. And yet I get to support a lot of the helpers, the pastors, the officers who are ordained pastors, the employees, the volunteers. And one of the things that we've done is for the clergy, especially, we did in 2020 a social justice day just for that. And it was interesting because it wasn't the beginnings of Pearlescence, so we focused a lot on how people could get involved in doing what we're doing and extend our footprint. And it was good because it was 2 weeks before the pandemic shut down everything. And I saw the fruit of that seminar during the whole pandemic when our officers homeschooled children and still worked on the front lines every day and served over 9 million meals in Greater New York. And I saw that practice, that the stuff that we had poured into them that day was definitely something that helped them get through. So we circled back this year and did a similar day. So 3 years later, you can imagine, it wasn't completely the same people, but a whole lot of them had been here 3 years ago. And it was so interesting to see how we just had a completely different approach to that training, because now everybody has been through a pandemic. And we think a whole lot more now about how do we empower the helpers? How do we make sure they are just ready for the marathon and not for the short race, right? To just do an Olympic analogy here the day after the Olympics. So what we found that day kind of turned out to be a lot of inwardly empowering for them, as well as outwardly focused. And I think that there was somebody who wrote to me after and said, this was the best training I have been to in my whole career. And that was an officer for over 30 years. And I was so excited that we hit that mark in that place because it doesn't happen by itself. So what we are learning, and we will learn that together with your organization and everybody else who is faith-based or not faith-based, that trauma-informed practices are the fruit of personal reflection and intentional rest and reflection. We need to stop. We need to look at what we're doing, if we are empowering something here, or if we're just going. We have learned how trauma-informed practices become visible in our lives over time. As we start paying attention, we will change our language. We will change how we speak with each other, because we realize that we cannot use the language that we used 20 years ago with all this crisis around us. We have to be much more careful how we use words in order to lift up others instead of pushing them down. And the potential that we have, and you know this, it will prevent burnout. It will promote healthy practices and help everyone to stay the course in order to be able to be this community that creates change for the long run.
I mean, excellent. Everybody has to take a breath, slow down, maybe put down your devices a few minutes a day, focus on whatever you want to focus on, a little quiet time, introspection, think about things. It's just a different world, I like to say. It's nothing we grew up with. to me, it seems like it's just kind of a crapshoot, and it's changing constantly. And in order for us to deal with that, we have to just take that breath and step back, kind of thing. Now, Raissa, what do you do to keep yourself going, empowered, that you want to share? And then I want you to get into Pearlescence, because that is, I don't want to be punny here, ladies, but like, that's the pearl. It truly is so beautiful. I can't say enough good things about it. So tell us about the program after you tell us about yourself a little bit.
Okay. So definitely I've had to learn the hard way how to take care of myself, right? Being just my type of personality, I love to be go, go, go. I love to help, do, like always on. My brain rarely is like quiet. But I do have to protect myself, right? I have to be careful. And that starts every morning. I need to have my personal devotional time. I need to have my personal prayer time. I need to have my personal pause time. It's not just talking to God, but letting him respond, just sitting in his presence and being, okay, he's empowering me, right? And then also therapy. Mental health care for myself is also a huge part of my regimen. I take my mental health care very seriously, being someone that advocates for mental health care. I also want to normalize, like, the best therapists have their own therapist, the best providers have their own provider. We all need someone to talk to. We all need someone to unload on. We all need someone to just be a safe space. Like, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking. Help me figure it out. Right. So that has been a huge part for me. And also for our program, we really do encourage that as well. And we have established that. We talk a lot in our conversation just now, but in Pearlescence, about training. Not only do we train the providers to be protected, we also train volunteers, right? How can we protect the survivors by making sure that the volunteers we have are ready, and that they're trauma informed, and that they have the right approach, and that they're there for the right reasons. We really do have a comprehensive vetting process when people come to us saying, I want to be a part of this work. Right? Because you can hear about it and you think like, wow, they're doing this, they're doing that, I want to do that. But those are not the right reasons. This is not a work that you do to get famous or clout or social media attention. Like, this is really important, compassionate care that we're doing. And the less people know about it, sometimes the better. So we always have to make sure that the volunteers are coming with the right reasons. And then even through our training process, we're always like checking in. So how do you feel about that? And how would you respond to this? And as we're going through the outreach training, we're in this situation. What would you do? What comes to mind? Let's get out of the way, maybe the unspoken reactions that we have, the unspoken rules that we have, the outdated language, and let's be on the same page. This is what we say. This is what we don't say. This is what we do. This is what we don't do. And we execute that. And we're always on top of each other, keeping each other accountable. Like, hey, I noticed you use this wording. Let's make sure that we're using this word. I make sure, when we're approaching our volunteers, when we're approaching our survivors, let's make sure that our stance is okay, that our volume is okay. Sometimes we're very excited and the adrenaline kicks in and we're like, but we gotta reel it in. Right?
Reel it in.
Everything we say and how we do it and say it matters so much. And then we always have a time to debrief, right? And this is when the mental health care really kicks in, because we've had countless volunteers, and although everyone is different and every outreach is different, we always get the same response from a first-time volunteer. No matter how prepared they were, no matter how trained they were, they always think, wow, that's not what I expected. Now that I saw with my own eyes, I don't know if I can go back to my old way of living. I can't just ignore the signs. Now I know. Now I saw, right? And we have this time of debrief where we talk with all of our volunteers and we just open it up. What was our high from the outreach? What empowered us? What made us feel like, wow, this work is worth it? What was the low? What made this work hard? What was a difficult moment? And what are we learning? We always leave room for learning. Whether you're a 6-year veteran volunteer, this is your first time, we're all learning. And we leave room for that. And we talk very openly and honestly about the things we struggle with. Sometimes volunteers recognize their own triggers through this work. Like, oh, I didn't know seeing this or hearing that or being there would affect me the way it did. But now that I know, I have to deal with it. I have to take care of that part so that I can continue to do this work safely. And we also empower that debrief time with our partners, with our collaborators. Anytime that we work on anything, let's talk. How did it go? How did it feel? How are we doing?
I love it.
Very easy to be go, 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 go. But how are we doing? Are we okay? Can we do it? You know, what do we need? And that, I think, has saved us from a lot of issues, and has allowed this work to be done sustainably, which is a huge word in our program, sustainably, because we're in it for the long haul. We're not going anywhere. And in order to be that way, we need to be okay, and we need to be ready.
That is the key word, sustainability, right? No flash in the pans here, everybody. You point out a couple of good things, Raissa, which is, you know, we live in this society today. Well, I'm saying this, listening to what you're saying, that everybody so freely gives information about themselves and just opens up. They tell you everything about everything, you know. Everybody's online. It's almost like they're brainwashed. Give it, give it, give it. We have to learn to pull inward a little bit, pull it back. Be very careful, as both of you point out, kind of language we use, how we deal with people, how we treat each other. It is so easy to be sloppy, for lack of a better word, or used to something that has been done the same way forever, or we have seen being done. No, we have to really dissect. We have to analyze and come up with new, and in my opinion, very careful approaches in the world we live in today. And also, Raissa, you point out honest and open communication, something we preach at the Warriors. Look, everything's being thrown at children, at families, at everybody. So why aren't we the leaders? You know, give the correct information, the facts, the truths, and educate. That's what it's about. Raissa, how can the public help with outreach with Pearlescence? What do you need from them? Because we want to get everybody on board to help with a program that works. So what would you suggest they do?
That is an excellent question, Lynn. Thank you so much for asking. I mean, I think this is an amazing step towards that, getting that awareness out, awareness that there is something being done against human trafficking, that there are programs in place where trained professionals, you know, where trained providers are on the front lines interacting with survivors day in and day out, right? But we need support from the public. Our outreaches, you know, they come with a lot of resources for the survivor. We have a lot of connections, but all of those resources take time to prepare. They take time to fundraise for. So anything that the public can do to help us always just have the resources that we need for the survivors would be amazing. And we have more information with that in the link that we shared with you on our website, on our Amazon wish list. We have a great Instagram page and Facebook page that always keeps everyone up to date about what we're doing, where we are, what we need. So the more people can be involved with all of our social medias and things like that, it will definitely help continue the sustainability part of it.
Absolutely. And I will again have all the links. I will not let anybody get away from looking at every link, every ask. You know, Amazon wish list is so easy for somebody, you know, because some people can't volunteer or they don't want to. Let's be realistic, but they can buy something on Amazon that helps the sustainability. So there are so many different things. And I believe in 2024 going forward, everybody can and needs to do something. This is today's message. Absolutely. Major Margareta, do you want to finish us up? Well, I'd like to get some final thoughts from both of you to finish us up. I want our warriors to really understand human trafficking. It's dark, it's ugly, domestic violence, all vulnerabilities, right, within communities. But there is hope. Yeah. And there is an answer. And there are programs that work. Pearlescence, for one, and all the work of the Salvation Army. But people have to know more about it. I did my own, I didn't tell both of you, little focus group a couple of weeks back. And I'm like, what do you know about the Salvation Army? Just my little private. Everybody said the same thing to me. Don't they stand out there with the bells and the kettles? And I'm like, yes, and so much more. So we know we have to, as both of you are doing, your wonderful warriors, get out there, educate, raise the awareness, and show that all these dark, ugly subjects, there's a lot of light. Yeah. And we have to showcase always the light, not just talk about how bad everything is. I said before, slap a Band-Aid on things, talk about the light. And that's why I'm thrilled. You are both stuck with me to help you as we build out Pearlescence and all of the initiatives. So Major Margareta, finish this up. What would you like our warriors listening to know?
I think we need to look for the light. I mean,
Yeah.
God is the light of the world, and we are his hands and feet. That is just basic Salvation Army theology, that you can get involved. And in whatever way you want to get involved, you can get involved. There, we have 38 community center in the greater New York area. You can contact any of them, and there will be somebody ready there to put you to work if you're interested in volunteering. If you're interested in the specifics around trafficking, please reach out to us.
Mhm.
We do answer all the emails we get, and we get a lot of questions, and we are able to plug people in so many ways. Preventative work for children. We have music programs in this Greater New York division that are absolutely excellent, that are helping kids week in and week out to build their confidence, to build their God relationship, and to bring their families into a faith-based, safe space where they can talk about a lot of things that you might not talk about around your table at home.
Mhm.
So I think that get involved is the word. We the generational trauma can absolutely become generational blessing, and we are both testifying to that here. None of us live a trauma a life without trauma. We all have a past, and we all are dealing with things that has happened to us. But the
Mhm.
truth is that you can choose life, and you can choose joy, and you can choose to be on the front lines with those who are just committed to empower themselves by the love of God and
Mhm.
share that love with each other. And I also wanted to say, I will fight, like William Booth said, I will fight to the very end. And I think that's the Salvation Army's commitment to you and to the world. We will fight towards the end of time, but we need you. We are completely built on the donations from the public. We would not exist in Greater New York if it wasn't for all our amazing donors.
Mhm.
That's not a secret, and we are not apologizing for that, because this is not something that we come up with. It's I think that people love to give. I think people love to be involved, and I think people love to be blessed by being a part of what the mission of the Salvation Army is. So thank you for inviting us.
Yeah.
Oh, no, excellent final words. And also, people do like to give, but they have to understand what it is. This is what I think. And I also think when something works,
Yes.
then they're more willing to give. And again, because everything's chaotic, we just have to get in there and be those warriors
Yes.
and gather them up. Raissa, what do you want to finish this up with? You have anything to say?
Yeah, I want to say we can't give up. You know, the
Right.
work seems daunting at times. It seems overwhelming when we talk about numbers and figures and statistics. It feels like how can we ever do anything? Everything that we do is doing something. Even if it's for one person, we're doing something, and we can't give up. Like Major Iverson said, we have to continue fighting. We have to continue being a community that cares for others and doesn't turn a blind eye, and doesn't let the busyness of the world distract us from people who are hurting and in real need right at our doorstep. You know, this work, you don't have to go very far to find those who need help. It's truly down the street where you live, sometimes around the corner. And that faith and psychology are not enemies, right? But they work best together. And that is a huge part of our program. When people hear the Salvation Army, a church doing something about human trafficking, mental health, we work best together. We're not enemies, right? And we build on each other's strengths, and everything we do is through trauma informed, and we're more than happy to collaborate and partner and educate in anything we can do to continue creating change with community.
Those are excellent final words, because my middle name is Collaboration.
Boom.
And I
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest with you ladies, like I find it difficult if people truly want to collaborate. I know everybody's busy and trying to keep it all going. I understand that. I'm kind of not judging here, but I kind of am. We cannot get the work done, right, unless we come together. You
Yeah.
do what I don't do. I do things you don't do.
Yeah.
It's that big wheel with a lot of spokes. We must come together, make the wheel go around, and help vulnerable people. So again, I will have all of the information in the body of this video. There's a lot, but I'm going to have the book. I'm going to have everything in this video. The website is salvationarmynewyork.org. Pearlescence, everything will be laid out for everybody. I don't think thank you sounds like enough that I can say to both of you. It seems like kind of a weak word, actually, for all you do. But Major Margareta Ivarsson and Raissa Di Caterina, I want to thank you from the bottom of our heart, all of our warriors. We support you. We are here to help you in any way possible as we move along. And your dedication and commitment truly is without peer. And I have to say, I am just thrilled to know and honored to know both of you. And I really want, may God bless you. Keep up the great work. Let us speak again soon, because these issues need to be spoken about much more often. And we need to just keep snowballing it and raising awareness. So I want you both to know on this Monday afternoon going forward, you are indeed both warriors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. We want to just extend our deep gratitude on behalf of the Salvation Army for this time, for the space, for all that you do with your warriors. And we just are very honored to stand shoulder to shoulder with your community as well in this day and age when we really need each other. So thank you, and God bless you, your ministry.
Thank you. Thank you. Let us speak again soon.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.